I was 23 in grad school pursuing my graduate degree in health promotion. I had suffered a lot from depression and anxiety and um, a lot of mental health things related to childhood trauma and family trauma. So I was in a very delicate place, but I was ultimately struggling with depression and with suicidal ideation. Full disclosure, trigger warning, all the trigger warnings because I'm the whole trigger warning. But so I was really, really struggling with suicidal ideations, which is what led me to going to a crisis center where I went and asked for help, was prescribed a medication, Lamictal or lamotrigine, which is the generic form. They typically use it for seizures and mood disorders. I was taking it for severe depression. So I took the medication for about 28 days. And around that time, I started getting very common symptoms. It was nothing too unusual at first. It was just kind of flu-like symptoms. I had like a fever and I just kind of felt sick. And so I went to the doctor and they're like, yeah, you have the flu. This was in January of 2014. So this flu season. I thought, okay, I have the flu, and went home, taking, just Tylenol, cold and flu, type stuff. Within 24 hours after being at the hospital, my entire body, oh, excuse me, was covered in blisters. And my skin started to slough off with the blisters. It was really, really gruesome and it was really, really fast. Talk about resilience. This is one of the moments that I know I have like a super strength of some sort because, my background is in health. I've worked in health. I've worked in different places and involved in that. So I was aware of the severity of the situation, but also strangely not aware of how serious it was. I think that was my body's way of protecting myself because had I known exactly what was happening in that moment, I probably would have freaked out. But I woke up, I will never forget, 4:44 in the morning, and I could no longer walk because my feet was covered in blisters. I mean, they were all over my body, all over my hands. And I remember crawling into my bathroom, flipping on the light, and seeing that all the skin on my face was like black like my shirt. I mean, I'm a brown skin girl, but my skin was like dying. And I immediately was like, this is not the flu. And it was like something in my brain was just activated. And I was like, I need to get to the hospital. But in my mind, in my 23-year-old mind, I was more worried about the hospital bills than I was about my safety. And that I think that's such a telling thing about our healthcare system here in America because I was bleeding, but I was like, let me get my ID and my insurance card and my cell phone charger because I'm about to be in the ER for, hours and hours. So in this moment, I'm just like, I just need to get myself to the hospital. And so I didn't want to call an ambulance because something very weird about our healthcare system here. Ambulance rides are not included in our insurance. So I was like, it's going to cost $2,000 for me to go to do this. I can't do that. I can't afford that. Let me call my friend. So I called my friend. She's the only person I know who would be an insomniac and up at that hour, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I call her and I'm like, hey, I need you to take me to the hospital. I can't see, I can't walk. Something's wrong. She's like, are you drunk? I'm like, no, this isn't that. I need you to come get me. And so she was there within a few minutes. But when she walked in my apartment and she saw me, that's also when I knew like this is really bad. 'Cause she was like terrified. And I could see the look on her face of like, oh my God, what happened to you? And so I'm just like, we don't have time for this. Like, I'm the one, being the leader in this situation, even though I'm the one that needs help. So get to the hospital really, really fast. I mean, in this situation, I didn't even wait. They just took me straight back to, the hospital bed, and the doctor comes in and she's looking at me and she's like, you're losing your skin. And I'm just like, what does that mean? And she's like, oh, we can't treat you at this hospital. You have to go to a different hospital. And I'm so confused because I'm just like, what is even happening at this point? Like, you're saying I'm losing my skin, but like, why? I just woke up like this. I thought I had the flu. They're like, no, they didn't want to tell me at that point what it was. They just said, you're losing your skin and we have to get you to another hospital. So at that point, I'm just like, can I get pain medicine? And they're like, we can't give you any pain medicine until we do like a tox screen to see what kind of medicine you're on. And I'm like, I was just here, the day before, and I told them all the medications I'm on. I can tell you again. They're like, nope, we can't give you anything until we get a urine sample. And at this point, I have gone to the bathroom so many times, and every time it feels like I'm peeing glass. Like it's just so painful, and there's blood. It's just like gruesome. So I'm like, whatever you have to do to get me pain medicine, please just do it because I'm in so much pain. I think at this point, my body knew that, like, hey, I'm safe. And this is a common thing they talk about in psychology where once you get to the level of safety that you need, then your body feels like all the pain, all the scary, all the everything. So I was just very like, oh my God, I literally felt like I was on fire. Like, I can only describe it as like, when you accidentally touch a curling iron, you get that. It was that over my entire body, like inside, outside, everything. And at this point, like now, it's just the skin's starting to come off even more. So there's so many things. And so then, okay, get to the next hospital, they have to, let me go back. So before I left that hospital, they had to catheterize me, which I knew what catheterization was. But in this moment, all I'm thinking is, this is what I have to do to get pain medicine. So just do it. So it turns out that one of my friends was the nurse on call that day. Such a weird, like, series of events, but she was the one who was on call. She's the one who had to catheterize me. Most pain I've ever experienced, like something that's already burned and already, hurt. And now it was just like, oh my God, I was screaming profusely. And at this point, they're trying to get in contact with my mom and tell her, like, hey, we have your child and she's on the way to trauma hospital. My mom, we have a very estranged relationship. And even at this point in my life, we were very, not good. And so she was like, oh, just send her to a hospital that's closer to our house. And they're like, ma'am, we have to take her to the hospital that's closest. And so my mom was just being really uncooperative. So anyways, they send me to a different hospital. I get to that hospital. And when I get there, there's doctors waiting on me. So I know, like, this is bad. Like, I went straight back to the, exam room the first time. But this time there's doctors waiting on me. Oh, this is like, I felt like I was in Grey's Anatomy. I was like asking the guy, I'm like, are they all here for me? And he's like, yep. And so I knew, like, at that moment, oh, this is really bad. And so get into that hospital. That's where they diagnosed me with Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And it's so funny because even in this moment, my resilience is also coming out again because they're telling me, like, we have to intubate you. And I'm like, okay, they've given me medicine at this point, so I'm not in as much pain. But typically when people are intubated, they're unconscious. Well, I was not. There's videos of me dancing and listening to the IV beeps and just dancing to this, just being way more alert than what I was supposed to be. So that was very unusual from the beginning. So they're telling me all these things about, you can't do this, you can't move with this. And I'm just kind of like doing what I want. And so then the very last thing I remember was, a male doctor. He had little tiny little glasses. I don't know why his glasses were so small, but he had tiny little glasses, and he came in and said, you have Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And at this point, again, I'm intubated, so I have a whiteboard and I'm writing on the board. I'm so myself even in this moment because I literally wrote, who the fuck is Stevens-Johnson? Because all I'm thinking is, like, who is this person and what did he do to me? Because this is terrible. Like, oh my God. But, my mom, she's there at that point. So she's like, Khaliah. And I'm just like, what? It's a valid question. And then I went unconscious. At that point, I lost consciousness and they, kind of gave me more of the sedation medicine. And then I was moved to another hospital where I spent 3 months in the burn unit in a medically induced coma. So I was air flighted to there. So there's a helicopter ride I don't remember. Lots of ambulance rides I don't remember. So yeah, we can park there for a second. You can ask some questions, but that was what led to it. So a lot of depression, a lot of suicidal ideations, but taking medicine that was supposed to help me not die almost killed me. So that's really,
I mean, the fact that, you're reaching out for help, you're reaching out for something that will make you feel better. And that's what we're told, right? Like, if you're struggling with depression, if you're struggling with anxiety, just reach out, go to your doctor, we'll take care of you. And then this taking care of you ended up not just having, minor side effects, like having a headache, for instance, but
life-altering side effects that no one warned me about. And that was, like, also the second, trauma was that my doctors never warned me about this happening. The pharmacist never warned me. No one ever said anything about, hey, Khaliah, if you start getting this, then you need to do this. Like, no one. And I even asked. And so that was in part where I struggled, especially when after the fact I found out that it was the medication. And so I was terrified to take any medication after that because exactly what you said. They tell us that, hey, you're supposed to take this medicine, it's going to make you better. And then it ruined my life. Like I was 23 years old, had my whole life ahead of me. And I woke up in a body I didn't recognize. I woke up to a face I didn't recognize. I couldn't walk. I couldn't recognize my own face because I was blind. Like I lost all my hair, I lost all my fingernails, 95% of my skin was gone. And on top of that, I had to learn how to walk and swallow and talk and needed countless reconstructive surgeries. I've lost count at this point how many surgeries I've needed as a result of the initial impact. So it was life altering. So to say that I did not trust medical providers and mental health after that is an understatement. And particularly when I found out, that I should have received a warning and I didn't get one. I should have received information about Stephen Johnson's and I didn't. So there was so much betrayal in this, but I never lost hope. And that was the like really strange thing about after the fact when I woke up and they're telling me all this stuff, everyone expected for me to be extremely depressed after that. And I expected for me to, be super depressed and go back to being suicidal again. And I just wasn't, after my experience, and we'll talk about that part, but afterwards, I had this very unexplainable energy and peace and positive that didn't fit. Like it didn't make sense for what I was actually going through in that moment. But I just knew, like, okay, there's a reason why I didn't die. And I was begging to die before all of this happened. And this was like the perfect opportunity for me to go. And I did it. So after that, I kind of knew, like, okay, there's purpose in my life. There's a reason why I was spared. There's a reason why I didn't get what I, initially wanted, which was to end my life. So crazy, 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 crazy.
It sure is. And I definitely want to get into the whole part about you waking up to a body and a face that's just different than what you know. But before we get into, the recovery and your mindset going through it, because I think that's so important to share with people, but I also wanted to hear what happened in the coma. So you've had your NDE whilst you were in a coma. What did you experience during your NDE?
So, what did I experience during my NDE? A lot, a lot to say the least. So the very first thing that I recall and will never forget is, like I said, I remember the doctor telling me you have Stephen Johnson's, and then I kind of just blacked out after that. But then I remember seeing myself. I kind of had that out of body experience where I was standing next to my body in spirit form and I just was looking at my body, going through all this stuff. And I thought I was dead. I legit thought I was dead at that moment because I'm just like, I should probably mention at this point that at this point in my life, I'm super religious. I'm very Christian, conservative, Southern Baptist, religion. So I didn't know about near death experiences. I didn't know anything outside of what, my religion taught me. So in this point in the experience, I thought I was dead because I'm just like, oh my God, I'm watching my body. Didn't know anything about out of body experiences. So I thought I was dead. And I could just, it was like I could see my, what I call spirit body, but it was just like light in speckles. It wasn't like what my physical body looks like. And I was able to take on like a perspective instantly while in spirit form. So like I could be standing next to my body for 1 second and then in a split second I'm like across the room and then I'm in another part of the hospital. So I kind of just had this like free range to just go wherever. And so that was scary at first because I was just like, I really thought I was dead. But then next thing I know, there's this like what I called at the time like a spirit body, which it was different from what my spirit body looked like. This looked like it was kind of like in the outline of a human, but it just looked like light. Like it was like how you look at the sun and it's just super bright, but it was this energy that was communicating with me. It could talk to me, but it wasn't like a human voice. It was just like I just understood it, and I didn't even know how to explain that at the time, but it made me feel safe. There was no fear involved. Like I knew that okay, this is a part of the experience, and it was just an inherent knowing. Like it wasn't a communication that like, hey, you're, but it was just like this knowing, and that was kind of the first thing that I noticed was like the telepathy, which I didn't call it that at the time, but that's essentially what it was, where we were just sort of communicating through my brain and it was not real actual words. And so it was telling me, and I'm asking questions at this point because I'm just like, what is going on? Like, what's happening? Am I dead? And they're like, nope, you're not dead and you're not going to die. You just need to see all this stuff. And so I'm kind of just like, okay, well, like, why? And they're just like, you'll understand, but you just need to go through this process. Like, there's things that you need to see about your past and the present and the future to understand your journey. So I'm just kind of like, okay. And so, mind you, all of this is sort of happening in conjunction with everything. Like everything's happening at once. It's very hard to explain, but like there's no time in spirit realm and in this part of the universe. Like there's no constraints. So how you think, oh, you have to walk to this room and go to the next room, that doesn't exist. You can just, wherever your consciousness is, that's where you are. So one of the first things I had to do was go back to my past. And that was difficult because, as I mentioned, I've been through a lot of trauma that was directly related to the experience. So, unfortunately, I was forced to watch what happened to me. And it was a memory of something that I didn't remember anymore. Like my body didn't remember anymore. So, I had to watch it happening to somebody that I loved. And they basically explained that to me like, you're not going to understand if it you're watching it to you. Like there's basically a disconnect of self, and so you have to watch it happening to somebody else because that's the way that your brain can understand that it shouldn't have happened to you, right? Because a lot of times we think, we're different than other people, or sometimes, especially with empaths, we're able to give compassion and love and understanding to other people, but we have a hard time giving that to myself. And they were basically saying, like, this is the part of you that got broken in your trauma, and we need you to, like, see it so that you can connect to it and understand it and heal it. So at this point, I'm kind of resistant because I'm just like, why do I need to see this? This is not, of all the things that I want to see, this is not what I want to go back to. But they're very clear that like I had to see this, and I could not touch anything in the past, even though we were there and I was in, the apartments that we used to live in when I was a kid and just different places. And I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we were in Oklahoma in this part of the experience. And so I'm having to watch this happen to a friend of mine at the time. She's someone that I viewed as very innocent, very pure. And they were basically like holding my eyes open because I kept trying to avoid like experiencing and seeing that. But they were like, you have to face this. So didn't understand it at the time, but later on I'm realizing that again, that was where my body and my consciousness were kind of separated because of that trauma. And so anytime you go through a severe trauma where you dissociate, there's a separation from yourself. And they were basically telling me like, you got to get back to yourself to heal all of this. So I didn't want to see that, but I had to. So, okay, I see that. I'm watching my friend get brutally sexually abused by people in my family, and I'm just like, oh my God. And like, I'm doing everything trying to save her. But they were like, no, you can't do anything about this. You need to just sit here and like absorb it. So that was very difficult. Um, but then I was able to see sort of some other things that happened in my past, but they were almost like as if I was in a car and I just sort of drove by it. They didn't make me like sit there and see that, but they were like, this is connected. And so what I understand now is that it's like they needed me to see it. They needed me to experience that because the past, present, and future pretty much all exist at the same time. There is no separation of that. So it's like they needed me to go over there to that space to collect what was mine and heal that part. Does that make sense? Like, so it was just sort of this passing of all these things. So went back to the past, and then they told me, I could go back and check on my body anytime that I wanted to. So I was doing that because I was like, it's weird because there was no like fear, but I just felt this like I need to go back and make sure my body's okay. And it was this way of like almost self reassurance that I wasn't gonna die. Like as long as I can see my body still there, like I'm good. So there was this intermittent kind of going back and forth between things and realms. And so that's when I was seeing that people in the hospital were doing certain things. And so I was able to see like nurses and doctors and identify them and say, hey, you did this and you did that. Whole time my body is completely unconscious, eyes are taped, but I'm watching them do certain things to my body that I had never been exposed to those procedures before. So there's no way I could have known, outside of viewing it, from in the room. So that was interesting. And so then, okay, I'm back with the spirit guide type thing, which I wasn't really calling it a spirit guide. I just knew that this was something that was guiding me and I could trust it because it was telling me all the answers and it was making sense. Once it was telling me things, I could feel that it was true. There was a lot of feeling, but not to be confused with emotions. Cause like when I was in this space, it was just like free. Like I don't even know how to describe it, but it was just like freedom. There was no restriction. There was no pain. There was no fears. There was just like, I don't know, like as long as I was looking at the guide and I was just sort of going with the flow of things, everything just felt limitless. I don't know another way to describe it, but it just felt like I could do anything. And they were telling me like, anything you bring to your consciousness, you can do it. So like at one point I became a raindrop. Like I was just doing random shit, just to be like, really? Can I really do that? Like, okay, let me be a leaf. Okay, let me be a raindrop. Okay, let me be a squirrel, just random things. And so then it was like, okay, I can go anywhere. And so they were kind of giving me like, hey, that was a really tough lesson. So just go and like look around for a little while, like almost like recess kind of thing, like, oh, just go and just explore. You did that part. So I went to Antarctica and I knew that there was like something significant, but they never told me like the whole story of what I was supposed to do with all of this information. But I distinctly remember seeing Antarctica and I remember seeing that there was things in the icebergs because there was lights coming from inside of them. And it was just like this, again, that same passing by kind of in a vehicle of some sort, but not a vehicle that, is like a car, but just passing it by. And so then it was like, okay, I could see things that were happening presently. So a different part of it, my friend at the time, she was pregnant. We had just found out that she was pregnant in December, and this happened in January. So she was getting ready to find out what she was having. And so all of this to say that she had her gender reveal party while I was in the coma, but I went to the party. So like I saw everything that was happening there, all the details, who was there, what the cake looked like, all the details, so that to the point that when she came to visit me, I already knew. I was like, it's a boy, you had a baseball cake, all the things. She's just looking at me like, okay, you're not wrong, but like, how do you know that? And I'm just like, I was there. And it was so real to me that when I first woke up, I thought that I was like, I was just like, no, like I was there. And I'm giving you just, how would I know if I wasn't there? And she's like, you've been in this bed, for 5 weeks at this point. So very strange. But yes, I was able to be in present time, things, real time things that were happening presently and be in the room. Another part of the experience, my grandfather, at the time, he was in the hospital. I did not know this prior to going into the coma, but he was in the hospital and there was things going on with his gallbladder. I knew all of those details. I could hear the people, I went to the hospital and was telling him, let them help you because, you need to get your gallbladder taken out. And he didn't want to do it because he wouldn't be able to eat, whatever he wanted after. And so I'm having like a live conversation with my grandfather telling him he needs to let these doctors, do the surgery and save his life. Well, then, of course, come to find out when I wake up, yeah, my grandfather had gallbladder surgery or was supposed to and my grandmother had to leave. And there was all these real things that were happening that I'm like, holy shit. But I was with him and they're like, no, you were in the hospital. And I'm like, no, like I talked to him and they're like, no. And there was even like certain phrases that I was like, well, he said this. And they're just like, how do you know that? And I'm just like, because I was there. So it was very strange. So that happened. I was able to visit present things. And then in terms of the future, this is when it got weird because I didn't really know that it was the future. There wasn't, again, there's no separation of past, present, future in terms of the only thing that it like looked different was that the past looked very dense. I don't know another way to describe it, but the future was very like misty, like not misty, like, oh, but it was just like less dense, almost like it's still being figured out along the way. So there's still moving pieces, but what was there was there. So one of the things that I saw that same friend who was portraying me in the past, I see her mom, but I've never met her mom in real life. I've never talked to her, seen any pictures of her or anything, but I distinctly remember now we're back at the part where, okay, someone comes in and takes my friend and we go to this hospital and there's this bus fire. There's just like all this random stuff, but like her mom is a doctor and her dad is a speedboat salesman. It was just like all this random stuff. That's not what it is in real life, but her mom looked like what she really looked like. And she had a specific haircut when I saw her in my dream in 2014. Well, fast forward to 2018 when I'm at that friend's bridal shower, her mom is standing outside looking exactly how I saw her in my coma 4 years prior to that. But she's like, yeah, I just got this haircut a couple of weeks ago. All this time, my hair's been really long. I've never cut my hair. So this is the first time that I've ever had short hair. And when she's telling me this, like it seems like it's so simple, but for me, that was the confirmation that I was actually seeing the future because it wasn't that I was seeing her in the present day and time. No, that was a future image of her. And that's exactly what they needed me to understand. It was like I was seeing all these different things just for the purposes of knowing that, hey, we can see the future. Hey, this stuff exists in the present time. You can remote view, you can astral travel, you can do all of these things. You have to go back to your past to reconnect with yourself, da, 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 da. Like all these things. It was just so that I could know. But again, didn't know that at the time. So I'm just like, why am I seeing, my friend's mom? And so then fast forward to when I'm waking up and I'm asking her, like, hey, is your mom a doctor? Is your dad a speedboat salesman? She's like, no. So that was okay. Maybe this isn't real, or maybe it's just, but when I saw her mom looking exactly how I saw her and she told me she had just cut her hair, I knew that that was like a future glimpse. So then that was like one example of future things. So then something about myself that I saw my future was like that I was meant to open this like wellness center. And I actually saw the building and it's like this whole like healing center type thing, but they were very clear like, hey, you're supposed to do this. And like I said, I saw the building, I saw the surrounding things around it. That that was like the part of my future that I'm comfortable sharing anyway. But then it was like the future of the world. So that's where it was like really all over the place. It wasn't like a clear, concise watching a TV like this is what the future's going to. It wasn't that, but it was like being shown that number one, there's like this very low vibrational energy that's here right now that is getting like slowly pushed out. So how I saw it was like there's this light kind of thing that's everywhere and it's sort of starting to take over, but in a positive way because this is where there was a lot of darkness and now there's like light. So it almost looked like similar to when you're in an airplane and you're looking down and you're flying at night and you can see like the city lights and stuff, but just imagine it like growing. And that's how I could see that this new energy is coming in to like take all of this low stuff away, the low vibrational hate, fear, all that stuff that's very low vibrational energy is like being pushed out. So the way that it kind of like looked at the time, because this was 10 years, almost 11 years ago, it was looking like, so say this is like the new energy and this is the old energy. Like the old energy is like trying to exist and this new energy is like pushing it out. So there's this like push and pull energy, but people's thoughts fuel this change. So every time people wake up, there's more light. Every time people resist, there's more darkness. So it was just this like seeing the light action of all of this and seeing the bigger picture, which is that this new energy is what is going to be the normal. And I don't have a date or anything like that, but I knew that one, it had already started. Number two, there was going to come another time that it was going to kind of activate. And I believe that was in 2020. But then after that, it was like everybody waking up. But then it was like a lot of destruction that I saw in conjunction with all of this. So there was like wars, there was fires, there was floods, there was a lot of natural disasters because essentially the earth is like revolting. We haven't treated it with care, so it's kind of pushing back. And so that's where it was like this push and pull energy. So that was a lot. Again, I was kind of just seeing the whole thing. But the biggest thing was like people are waking up to the fact that we can heal ourselves. And so that's why there was this huge emphasis on showing me kind of like the way that we have to do that and how we heal ourselves and how we got to that, because it really does start with all of us getting on a higher frequency, which has to do with our emotions, what we're feeding ourselves, what we're thinking, and how we heal our trauma. And because our society isn't set up for that, it's taking a lot of work. So it's happening whether people want it to or not. And that was kind of like the concerning part, was like seeing that, not to be confused with that left behind thing, because it wasn't like that, but I'm going to say the words, a lot of people will be left behind and it's their choice. Everybody has a choice. It's not a thing that's being forced on everybody, but essentially it's like a split's happening. Like our old earth is going to be on this frequency and then this new earth is going to be in the frequency. And it's not that like the old one's going to blow up and we're just, everybody's going to die. It's not that, but it's almost like it's being archived. So you know how when you delete something, you can archive it and you can still see it, but you got to go through it's like that. Um, but anything on that frequency, so fear, hate, any of those low frequency vibrations can't exist in the new one. So that's why there's been this massive awakening of people waking up about the truth of religion and the truth of capitalism and just all of the things in our society that are rooted in suppressing people's true identity, and all of that is sort of working its way out. So yeah. Ooh, excuse me.
That was a lot, and it's a lot for me to take in all of that knowledge. So I can only imagine, coming from a very religious background, as you were having to go through this trauma in itself with the hospital and everything, and then all of a sudden you're just overwhelmed with information about your past that you had blocked out, so something that was news to you but very triggering that you had to relive, and then all this information about the earth. And I don't know that you ever thought in terms of frequencies before, or waking up, being enlightened. So all of a sudden you need to understand all of that, but I tend to get the impression that that was not so much of an issue, that in that other realm you were able to cope with, what would be an overwhelming amount of information just fine.
Yes, because in that space, claircognizance and your other abilities are the senses. So I didn't have to understand anything. There was this inherent knowing, but it was almost like it was tucked away until my body could actually process it. So it was like this pinging back and forth. So it took me 10 years to kind of understand all this, because you're absolutely right. I didn't have any language or frequencies or anything. So to see, angels, and they don't look like what we all think they look like, but I wasn't scared of it, that was a lot. But it took, like I said, it took me 10 years to fully process kind of what all of that meant and what it was all meant to show me. And but like I said, when I woke up at first, there was this unexplainable peace. I wasn't overwhelmed. I just knew that what I knew before was not the truth, and I needed to understand why. It was more about understanding why what I already thought was the truth wasn't the truth than to prove what I saw was the truth. Because it was like, again, it's just like when you're in that space, there's like, you just are. There's no separation of thoughts and being, so you just are. And so it was more tough to, I tried to go back to normal. Like everything, in the experience stripped me of everything that I knew. So I was very much trying to grasp and hold on to anything that felt like what it did before. And so I tried to go back to church. I tried to carry on like normal, but it was like I always questioned religion. I was always the kid that got kicked out of Sunday school for asking too many questions. So I was very curious, I wanted to make sense. And of course, I was expecting to see white Jesus. I was expecting to see God on this, big chair with man with a white beard. And I didn't see none of that. And when I actually did see God, that was an experience I wasn't prepared for. but it felt so true, unlike anything that I'd ever felt hearing anything from church. That never made sense. The stories, the God loves you, but he's forcing you to worship him. And if you don't, you die. Like, it just, none of that made sense, like, from a logical standpoint. And then it's like, when you ask questions, they would say, oh, well, that's just you doubting God. But really, that's just critical thinking. That's consciousness. And that's what they try to suppress. So again, in my experience, it was very clear that your thoughts are your consciousness. Your consciousness is your connection to source. And so I didn't call it source. That wasn't what I would say. I was very much God, 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 Jesus, Jesus. And so that's the part of the story I probably need to tell right now, which is that, so through all of those experiences, again, I mentioned angels, and they did not look like what we think. They're not people. They look like transformers with a whole bunch of eyes and metal looking. It looks like metal, but it's not metal. I don't really know what kind of substance they're made of. But anyways, after I saw that, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of all of this. Like, take me to God. I want to see the manager. Like, I'm sick of seeing all this stuff. I don't care about this anymore. I want to go. I'm gonna talk to God. Because at this point, I'm wanting to know, why did I go through all this stuff? Why is all this stuff happening in the world? Why does all this bad stuff happen? If you're here and you're controlling all this, why not just, get rid of it, kind of thing. So the light body spirit guide thing is like, okay, you want to go see God? Let's go. So the next thing I know, we're like in this space. And again, there's no walls, there's no constraints, but it's just like these stairs, and they're like huge, like bigger than a human. Like, it's just like huge, but I'm not in body. So I'm just like sort of floating up there. So the light thing was like, I'm staying down here, you go up here. It's telling me that you can go, but you have to come back. You cannot go through the light, and you have to come back. Like, you can't stay. And so I'm just like, okay. So I'm in this space, and I go to the top of the stairs, and then it's just bright. Like, there's no other way to describe it. It's just like bright. But when I'm in this space, I see this giant mirror, and it is like so big that it's like the size of a planet. Like, I don't even know how else to like give it context, but it's just like huge, and it's like beautiful, and it's just, there's jewels and gold and light and just all these, just extravagant. But immediately, the second that I like connect to it, I am just like undone. Like I'm overwhelmed by this. Well, I can only describe it as just unconditional love, peace, freedom. There's just this warmth of comfort that I've never felt. Like, just this, and I was just undone. Like, I'm crying at this point, and it's communicating with me much like the spirit guide was, in the sense of there's no words, but it can understand me. It can understand my feelings, my thoughts, my words, everything. And like, it's showing me that it's been there with me through everything I've ever been through. So I'm just like, why did I have to see this? Why did I have to go through all this? Where were you and all this stuff? So it takes me, and in the mirror, it's almost like it's like a see-through mirror, like it's a prism, if you may. And in it, I can see anything, like everything and anything at the same time. So it's showing me exactly what I saw earlier, but now I can see it as it's happening to me. So it's not my friend anymore, but I see me as a small child, and these things are happening to me. And it's showing me that when I was being abused, it's like, so this is my body, and we're going to say this is my spirit. So when my body was going through what it was going through, it's like my spirit detached. It's showing me that it's holding my consciousness so that I wouldn't absorb any of that pain, and I wouldn't remember it and all of that stuff. It was sort of separating me from it. And at the same time, I'm seeing this, and in my mind, I'm asking, but why didn't you stop it? Like, why didn't you stop it? Because it's, it makes sense. You're God, you can do whatever. But it was clear to me that it was not like a human. It's not something that interferes in, if you may, but yet it is the existence of everything. Like, it was showing me that there's like duality. So there's light, dark, and in that space there was something trying to consume the darkness of what was there, but it was more darkness than there was light. But that light was more focused on protecting and holding my consciousness than it was about stopping that action. Because what I could also see was like, even though that person was doing something, there was something like sort of pulling them out, and then there was something pulling me up. So just like there's light trying to consume light, there's darkness trying to consume darkness. So both of those things. And so I'm just sort of like, why though? Like, why? And that was the most difficult part, is to know that it's telling me that we pick our paths, we pick our experiences, and there was things that I chose to experience in this life to basically null and void things from past lives or things from my family. I signed up for this mission, and that was like very difficult to hear. But then at the same time, it was this intrinsic knowing of recognizing that that's true. And so I'm having this, my humanness is still connected to my consciousness at this point. So I'm still asking questions, but then it's kind of showing me where it is in everything. So I'm able to see, okay, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's everywhere. Everything is all connected. So it kind of showed me like this global view of source consciousness, and it's literally in everything. Even in the darkness, it's there. Even in the things that are inanimate, it's there. Even in the things that are living, it's there. Everything is connected to this. And so it was kind of showing me this like, what's that word? I was bad at geography. Pangea. It was showing me like at one point everything was connected to everything, and we all had the same connection, but there's been this separation. So that's why there's this pushing out of the old and bringing back of the new, which is about collectiveness. It is about collective consciousness. It is about oneness. It is about everybody being of the same light kind of thing, but there being multiple ways to get there. And I think that's where our society lost it, because of religion, because of the patriarch, because of capitalism. It became there's only one way of being, and it's this one that everyone's charging all this money to join. But really, it's that all the religions are kind of like languages, and they're all saying the same thing, and you just choose which path you want to go to enlightenment. Now, the problem with Christianity is that it is not about enlightenment anymore, and I knew that as a Christian. There's That's a whole other conversation. But it was showing me that everything is connected. We're all connected. We're all one. As humans, as animals, as plants, we're all stuck together, basically. And that's where we're kind of moving back, because there's been this separation because of different frequencies, because there's been a lot of the earth that's been on this low frequency, and there's been people on a higher frequency. So everything's coming back to one solid frequency. And that's why everybody has to wake up, like, or they're going to get stuck on that old frequency, basically, which it'll still exist, but it just won't exist where the growth and the new stuff and where the light and all that stuff is. It'll be kind of like trapped on that frequency, basically. So even that was a lot. That was a lot.
It sure was. And I think it raises so many questions, but so many interesting points for me as well, to sort of understand that we have, the option of seeing things as they are, or almost as we are. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
But I think, and I know that I want to talk to you about karma and about your understanding of it, but almost like, you were talking about this event that happened to you, and being able to not just see the things that you were blocking out that was important for you to see, so you were able to heal that, but also to see the energies at play, right? Because we tend to think, and I remember a moment in my life when something happened. I dramatized it. I was very young, so everything was just tragic.
Yeah,
exactly. And I remember thinking, why would God allow for this to happen to me? I was a good person. I did everything right.
Same.
Why would they do this to me? Why would they let this happen to me? And now looking back, I'm just ashamed of that, because it was such a silly thing that I just turned into the end of the world. But what I'm realizing now with your experience is very much that there are things supporting us in each of those situations, and there are energies working to our well-being, maybe not overwhelmingly so, and not always ensuring the most comfortable situation that we can have. But we're not alone in this, right? So whatever happens, even if we're thinking, oh my God, this is tragic, why would any loving God let me go through this, like in your situation? But you are being supported and you are being loved. So I want to ask, how does it feel to now to know that in any kind of situation that you're going through, and I'm sure you've had challenges since, how
How does it feel now? So that was one of the places that it was difficult for me to sort of transition because, like you mentioned, I was of that mindset of like, why did this happen? And I'm such a good, and you said it like almost verbatim how I was saying it. I'm just like, I'm a good person, like I've never hurt anyone, I've never done anything, I've never, just I'm a good person. I make good choices, I care, I help. So why? But it was, I think the piece that I found in afterwards was knowing that I chose it. And if I chose it, then I must be getting something like on the other side of this. Like I chose it for a reason. I know my soul. My soul ain't choosing no stupid shit for no reason unless it's gonna be a good reason. So that's where I kind of saw like there's different like soul levels. And so like there's souls that are brand new that don't have as many like past life experiences, and so they may sign up for an incarnation that's kind of light. They experience new levels because life and earth, it's very much like a school. Like that's kind of the vision that I got when I was seeing like the different like places of earth. But everything is about lessons, and if we were comfortable all the time, we wouldn't really be learning, we wouldn't be growing. So to talk about how did that shift afterwards, it was like I had peace in knowing that if I chose it, there was a good reason. And if I chose it, then there was something that was helping me get through it. And that's what I was able to see, that when I signed up for this, there was terms and conditions that I knew that I would go through, severe sexual trauma, that I would go through negligent narcissistic parents, that I would do all of this. But I believe that I needed those experiences because, again, you can't help yourself if you don't see yourself, and you can't really help anybody else if you don't see yourself. So how could I raise the vibration of the collective consciousness if I didn't have those low vibrational frequencies to be able to mirror and reflect so that I could raise those people up? So it's like it made sense. Did that change my emotional state? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was still mad because it was just like, why though? Like, why? And so that's when I kind of saw like, so there's these evolutions of souls. And like I said, some souls are newer and some are older. Excuse me. And some have certain tasks that they want to achieve in this life or whichever one they pick. And so that's something that I guess brought me a little bit of comfort. But then in terms of the whole thing about karma, so I didn't really know anything about karma prior to the experience other than, what goes around comes around. But I didn't understand like I think it's Hinduism or Buddhism that look at karma in a certain way. And so I didn't really have any understanding of that. And I have limited understanding even of it now. But from what I can understand is that some level of that is true. There is a give and take. There's this push and pull. So when we as a person puts negative energy out into the world, we are susceptible to receiving it back because it's like we're all mirrors. We're all that level of God and source connectedness. When they say, you meet people who are a reflection of you, there's truth to that. But then how does that play into karma? So when you put something out, does it necessarily always come back? Like immediately? No. But what we know about energy is that it is neither created nor destroyed. So it has to go somewhere. So whether it comes back to you or it comes back to somebody in your family, like that energy will return one way or another, just like if you put good out. But then where I think the questions come up for me is, okay, well then if I'm putting good out, then why am I having these bad experiences? And that's the question that I had to answer about like generational trauma and generational things, because I'm fighting battles that my ancestors didn't win. I'm fighting demons that my family refused to deal with. So it's gonna go to somebody in that bloodline until somebody gets rid of it, kind of thing. And so if it didn't go to your mom, it's going to go to you. If you don't deal with it, it's going to go to your kid. So it's almost like a tree root kind of thing. Like it's going to go somewhere in that. You can't escape it. Now, this is where it gets, there's different spiritual beliefs of magic and all that stuff. And again, all these things are real. Like the psychics and mediums and all of that is real. Now, what people do with that, there's definitely limits on what you can do, but then there's also no limits on what you can do at the same time, because if your knowledge is there, your intentions are there, your consciousness is there, then it's there. But if you do something without intention, without consciousness, can it exist? Yes, but it's not going to be as powerful, basically. Like our intentions and our thoughts fuel everything. So I'm still honestly unpacking the whole karma thing, because I understand that if my ancestors didn't deal with it, then I have to deal with it. Cool, awesome. But does that mean I'm gonna spend the rest of my life fighting battles that really don't belong to me? And that's where it was like, okay, well, what are they really asking me to do? So then that goes back to why I had to watch the things happen in my childhood. Because, like I told you, there was like something that I could see on them that was pulling them, and then there was something pulling me. So essentially, if I was to never heal myself, if I was to just sit with that trauma and let it live in my vessel, it's essentially not going to them and it's staying with me. If I actually do the work to heal it, then it's going to go away. It's going to dissolve. It's going to go back to where it rightfully belongs, kind of thing. But if I'm just sitting here holding it, then it never takes movement. Do you understand what I'm explaining? So you have to deal with it. Somebody in the family has to deal with that generational karma, or else it's going to continue to exist. Now, you can transmute energy again, because you can't really like destroy it, but you can turn it into something else. So that's where it was really important for them to see, for them to show me and for me to see that I need to do something with this. And it's not about getting revenge, it's not about getting even, it's not about, oh, you do this to me so I got to do it to you, but it's truly about, this really terrible thing happened to me that separated me from myself. So the way to counteract that is to be very connected to self, to be very serious about me, because at one point in my life, nobody was protecting me, nobody was caring about my energy. So it's like, you have to counteract that by doing it yourself. So in a less, severe example, is kind of like, I like to use the example about friendships or people that I meet, because I'm always trying to manifest, meeting healthy, safe people. And then there's been times where even with my awakening, I've still met some what I call lessons. And I'm like, okay, well, am I just reflecting this energy? Is this something that I'm just putting out there? And ultimately it was something within me that either didn't believe that I deserved better than what I was receiving, or it was a lesson that I needed to learn. Like, hey, you say that you're standing up for yourself, but when this person comes in your life and demands things from you, you still operate from that old space. So you got to keep doing it until you no longer do that. So that, think about that, but for everything. So like, the reason why I say we can heal ourselves, and it really just means we have to start with healing our trauma, because you have to go back to whatever separated you from yourself and reconnect to it. So for me, that meant knowing what happened to me and accepting it and seeing how that had an impact on not only me, but my family. And there was karmic wounds and things that were created because I told my family and they didn't believe me. So now there's things that they have to deal with because of that. But, excuse me, but if I continue to blame myself and not put that energy where it deserves, then I'm essentially holding on to that frequency even longer. So I know I went back to the serious example, but it's the same for less serious things too. So the longer that I keep believing that, oh, I don't really deserve better than that, then you're going to keep getting exactly what you think that you deserve. And that's why, there's that saying of, oh, when you stop looking for love and you love yourself, that's when you find it. There is some truth to that, because you're ultimately telling the universe what you deserve. You're ultimately saying, hey, I love myself so much that I'm not accepting any of this. You can't send me any more of this because I'm not going to accept it. So they are going to match whatever your frequency of output. There we go. Whatever your output is, that's what they're going to match your input. So there is that give and receive of the karma energy. And then there's the, if you do bad, it may not be immediately, but it's going to come back to you at some point. There is this kind of circular thing in it. I think about it a lot with, the planets, like the returns, like solar returns and all those things, right? So everything is moving. So it may not come back this cycle, but it'll come back the next cycle. And if it doesn't get you on that one, then again, you're basically just stacking up, things that you have to deal with in your next life. If you don't relieve that obligation this time, then you have to the next time. And so that's also something I can talk about, because that was why I couldn't die. And a lot of people in near-death experiences say that they were given a choice. I was not, because part of my karma was that I had to live. I wanted to die. I was ready to go. So part of, again, that opposite action thing, I had to live. And not only did I have to live, but I had to live to tell the story to help other people, because that's part of, hey, when you take yourself out of a contract before you're supposed to, there's fines, there's things that you have to, penalties, if you may. So because, I was trying to take myself out, that was basically, life penalty. Like, hey, no, you actually can't die. And you actually have a job to do now. So, yeah, go do it. So that's a light way of explaining how all of that kind of goes together. But it's very complicated and I'm still making sense of it. But ultimately, we have a contract, you fulfill that contract. Some people's contracts are a lot easier, some people's contracts are a lot harder. Some people that have hard contracts had easier contracts in other lives. Some of the ones that have easy ones had really hard ones. So that's the thing about, everybody is on their own journey, everybody is on their own level of healing, and everybody has a different journey or thing they need to do in their life. And that's why it's so important not to compare, but simply use the people that come to you as a reflection of something you need to see in yourself. So don't look at it as like, oh, you meet someone and you wish you have what they have. They're basically showing you, hey, you want this, and here's an example of how you could have it. So instead of using low vibrational energy like jealousy or envy or anxiety, you have to reflect what you want. So you have to respond to that experience with the energy that you want. So if you respond to it in a negative way, people ask all the time, why do I keep meeting this person? Why do I keep meeting somebody? I meet the same person over. Because you didn't learn the lesson, because you didn't get what you were supposed to get from that experience. And as soon as that you do, then you'll move on to the next phase. So yeah, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that was a game shift for me too, seeing people as lessons and blessings as opposed to good and bad, or anything like that. But yes, now is it uncomfortable when we have to disconnect from someone? Yes, but it's ultimately an opportunity for you to express your growth, to express your healing, because the way we react, the way we respond is the interaction, right? So we all have free will, and I love what you said about, we're not hurting, but hurt is a byproduct of all these different things that are happening at the same time. But, and I'm going to say this very carefully, because as a trauma survivor, I'm very sensitive about people saying, oh, you choose to be hurt or you choose to be traumatized. No, because there are experiences that absolutely hurt people and change their lives and all of those things. And I can say that one of the things about why this experience didn't take me was because I looked at it as some valuable teaching opportunity from the beginning. When I woke up from the coma and I knew, like, oh my God, I did not die, I was immediately intrigued and curious why. So it was like this, what am I living for? What is this trying to teach me? Because in my mind, I'm like, I was already suicidal. I was already experiencing some one in a million experience. Why didn't you just let me die? Because that would have been the perfect time. You know, nobody would have been like, oh, she hurt herself. And no, it was some freak accident. But it was like the curiosity of what am I supposed to learn from this was what was kind of like driving me to continue, because that first year, like I said, there was this unexplainable, like, just calm, and like I was not depressed. And even that first year, like learning how to walk and having so many surgeries and everything, like I was very calm for, considering what I was going through. But it was kind of an unconscious choice. I think that was one of my gifts. They kind of like gave that to me, like, hey, you can do this. Because by that second year, like once I had the year anniversary, and again, this is why I said about cycles and karma, it moves in the same time. Because when I got to that 1 year anniversary, it was like that calm pill wore off, and I was like angry. I was just like, what? Be healed. And I'm talking about the doctors. They told me that I'd be back to normal, in a year's time. And so I believed that, and I believed it. And so when I got to that year mark and I was still learning how to walk and I still couldn't swallow, and I still looked like Napoleon ice cream and had 3 different skin colors and all this, I was irate. And so that was like, again, another shift. But I needed to experience that, because it's not about never experiencing negative emotions. It's about processing through those negative emotions in a way that doesn't harm your vessel. And suppressing it harms your vessel. That's what I saw with the childhood trauma that I had experienced, because I had been holding on to that for so long. It was basically causing a block in my root chakra. So I wasn't able to feel safe and secure and get those things, because there was a blockage in my actual chakra system. So I say all of this to say that we're meant to feel the fullest extent of everything. It's not about good and bad emotions or good and bad feelings. It's about how do you process it. So when I was angry, did I go and blow some shit up? No, absolutely not. Did I beat anybody up? No, those aren't the things. That would be a negative way to handle negative energy. So you're then taking your negative energy and creating more negative energy because of your negative energy. But what I did was I chose to transmute that energy. So, yes, I was angry that I trusted medicine and trusted a doctor who isn't even a real doctor. That's a whole other story. Um, but I was angry, but I used that to feel, okay, there has to be another way. There has to be another way, because this isn't trustworthy. So it's almost like using your anger as like fuel to find truth. So that's kind of what fueled me to look for natural things and start my journey of, okay, homeopathic and holistic type things, which that's when I was able to see, oh, our society has taken us away from this process of natural healing, because you can't make money on things if somebody's growing it in their backyard. So that's the point. We're meant to go back to nature. We're meant to go back to our fullest being before all of the trauma. So for me, that meant sitting with all that stuff and seeing it, but not just seeing it, but doing something different with it, seeing it now. So for me, that meant speaking truth. So for me, there was a major block between my root chakra and my throat chakra, because I wasn't speaking truth. I wasn't speaking the truth of what authentically happened to me. And that's also, again, that thing I talked about. Suppression is not helpful to your body. So the second that I started actually speaking my truth and talking about what happened to me, like I started noticing things in my life were changing, because there was no longer blockages in my actual body. So I could get information a lot clearer. I could get gifts easier once I was operating from a space of authenticity. So expressing myself authentically was a part of the process. Finding other things that weren't medicine to help me feel safe was a part of that. And that's ultimately what led me to more truth later on. So it was just a process of understanding that we're never meant to not experience anything. You're meant to experience it. You're just meant to process it in a way that doesn't harm you and doesn't harm other people.
Yeah, that's a really important lesson to learn, and I can imagine it took years for it to really sink in and to figure out how to process the emotions and how to deal with it.
So much time. And that's also something I want to make sure people understand. Healing is not a quick thing. It's not meant to be, ooh, wave this magic wand and now you're better again. Like, no, because while there is not time in the spirit realm, we're still bound to time in this realm, right? So your body needs time to integrate what your spirit is telling your mind and what your mind is then telling your body. Like it's all together, like very much that past, present, future, mind, body, spirit thing. It's the same, it's all connected. So you need time to integrate upgraded knowledge, much like how you upgrade your iPhone and you need to give it some time to do that. It's very similar. Your body needs time to integrate that higher knowledge, because if not, it can cause, psychosis, spiritual psychosis. Things can go haywire if your mind isn't integrated to receive what your spirit knows. And so, yes, it took a long time, and I had to be patient with myself, because I'm one of them people, like, I want to know now, and I want to know everything now. I want to know if there's steps 1 through 10. I want you to tell me the next two steps that's coming, because I want to not only want to know what's happening now, I want to know what's happening later. So that was also part of my lesson, was learning that we're not meant to have all that information all at once, because it can be very overwhelming. Had I known everything that I know now 10 years after this experience, I would have had a mental breakdown. I would have literally lost it. So it takes time to integrate those experiences. And so when this happened in 2014, my physical body was not able to integrate that knowledge yet, because my body was physically healing. But I would say, 5 years later, 2019, 2020, when the whole pandemic thing happened, I was in a different space mentally, so I could take on more of that upgraded knowledge. So by the time 2020 came, that's when my gifts were on 10,000. So that's when the psychic gifts and the premonitions and all of that stuff came live. And I was an intuitive person, prior to this experience, but not like afterwards. And it was to the point where I'm in people's heads, basically, and especially the people that are close to me, that I have a connection with. Because again, what you love, what you care about is a part of you. So whether they're your family or not, because again, we're all connected, when you spend a lot of time with someone, your energy can connect with theirs, much like family can. Now, granted, the generational curses and all that stuff is different, but like, you can connect. So I I also struggled with, I didn't tell this story for a long time because I didn't want anybody to think I was crazy. I didn't really even understand everything. So how am I going to explain it if I don't understand it? So I didn't even talk about the spiritual experiences and all of that for a few years, until after I started having the spiritual experiences where I was clearly, you know, talking to something that wasn't alive anymore. But then my understanding of death and all that, it's not a physical, yes, the body physically passes, but your spirit just kind of transitions and transforms into another part of your soul. So when people pass, they're not gone. Like, their spirits are still able to do exactly what my body was doing. Um, but it took a long time for me to feel comfortable talking about this and understanding it. Some things had to click for me first, of, hey, you're not crazy. And so then, once other people around me were confirming the things that I was saying, and like, I had my first mediumship experience, and that I didn't even know I was doing that when it happened. Let me just put that out there. I did not know, nor was I like, hey, let me talk to some dead people for you. No, it just happened. And it was so real, though. Like, it was so clear that I was able to connect with something that was giving me this information, because it wasn't anything that I would just know. So after those experiences, I was like, okay, spirit, what you want me to know? What do you want me to do? And it was very clear that I want you to share. I want you to share your experiences so that people know this is real, and that they know they can do it too. And I'm not special, I don't claim to be some chosen one or whatever. I joke about being chosen, but no, we all have these abilities. You basically just have to get all the crud out of your system so that you have a clear channel. And that crud is in the form of trauma, fear, anxiety, guilt, stuff like that. So it's important to give your body the chance to be what it was before all those things happen to you. And once it is, then you can have access to everything, literally everything.
And when you are saying that you're not special, thinking that doesn't sound right. And I don't mean it in the sense that you have abilities that others cannot access, but I mean it in a way that, you know, you've gone through so much, and that's even an understatement saying you've gone through so much, because you've had multiple experiences that I think 1% of us end up experiencing one of those things, you know, like a medical, yeah, how do we call it, a medical malpraxis or random thing that just goes haywire, and then the abuse in your household that's probably a bit more common happening, but still, you know, happens to a fraction of the population. I was also really triggered by the fact that, you know, something was going super weird with your body and you were stressed about that, and you were thinking about the bills and how much the ambulance would cost and getting somebody to drive you, because that would be an extra cost that the insurance wouldn't cover, which should be the last thing that you would have to think about in a life-threatening situation, right?
When I think about that, I cringe when I think about that. That's what I was concerned about. But that was my real, experience as a broke 23-year-old college student. I can't afford a $3,000 ambulance bill right now, girl. Let me call my friend and tell her to come get me. So that's real. And that's why I was saying, I wanted to bring light to these issues, because in America, this is a very common experience. And it wasn't until I met friends that live in other countries, and I remember saying something about, being worried about the ambulance, and they were confused. They were like, "What?" And I'm just like, "Oh, because it's so expensive." Like, and they're like, "But you have insurance." I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't cover that." And they're like, "Why?" I don't know. It's just the norm of what it is. But there was just so many things. Like, there were so many things that I truly believe that my soul, one of my reasons, is that I'm meant to bring light to otherwise very dark situations. And my energy has been this way my whole life, even before that experience. I truly am a light in the dark. So yeah, I mean, it's weird because I hear you and like, yeah, girl, you're special because this is some really unique stuff. But I try so hard to be normal. I try so hard to just be like, I'm not like a magical, but I low key kind of am. And but I know that that's part of my mission, is to help people understand that you don't have to have a near death experience to have access to what I am experiencing and what I can do. You just have to heal your trauma. You just have to go play with your inner child, because they hold all the codes for what are supposed to have in this life outside of the trauma. So, I mean, I guess I'm special, but I just feel like, I don't know. I'm just a regular girl from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I have had to come into that awakening. And again, that's part of my thing. My natal chart says that I was Leo South Node, which meant in my past life I was somebody very famous or somebody who had a lot of attention. In this life, I'm a Aquarius North Node, so I'm meant to be less about myself and more about the community and humanity. So it makes sense. Um, but yeah, I feel like, in almost in part, that it had to be somebody so normal that this happened to, for people to actually learn and be inspired from it. Because if had I been a famous person that this happened to, and it would have changed it. People wouldn't really be able to identify or see themselves in me. That reflective thing wouldn't really be there. And so I think that's partially why I had to have this normal ass life, to be this world changer. Because most people are. Some things about my religious upbringing I still kind of look to sometimes, but there's a reason why in the Bible they used all these very common people to do miracles with. Then they didn't use the elite royal people and the tax collect. They didn't use any of those people to exemplify the things. And in speaking of that, there's, we obviously have had to unpack religion and all of that stuff through all of this, but there is still some truth to the Bible and all of that. But does it mean what we think it means? No. And is it meant to be taken literally? No. And is it actually a telling of a virgin that gave birth in a shack. No, it's not. And if people learn to look at symbolism and look at the imagery of that, they'll see what it really means. It's, again, it's not to say that all of it is just lies, but it has been mistranslated so many times that what we have is not really truth anymore. But all of that to say that that imagery of those stories of using people that are humble and blind and mute to tell stories, that's true in the sense of they put that coding in somebody who would actually go and help. They wouldn't put this big of something, world changing energy in somebody who's going to live in their ego and only be selfish. You know what I'm saying? So, like, they had to pick somebody average and normal to do something like this because most people can relate. I'm a pretty relatable person for the most part, outside of my 1 in a million trauma. But yeah, a lot of people experience the childhood trauma that I've experienced, and it hurts my heart to see those statistics of 90. I've seen upwards of 90%, 93% of girls have experienced some form of, sexual abuse in their life. So even that, and I also, it was clear that there's been this attack on like divine feminine energy, and us as women, we have so much spiritual access because our wombs are like a portal basically. We can create life whether we become mothers or not. Every woman who has a womb has direct access, to source. And so that's why, unfortunately, the more power you have, the more susceptible you are to people trying to take it. And so that's been one of the things that was hard for me to digest. But the more and more I talk to spiritual people in different communities, we all kind of have the same similar experiences of being sexually exploited, being sexually harmed. And that's telling of there's a healing power and energy that people try to take, and how they take it is not right. And it's horrible and wrong. And that just goes to show that there's so much power in divine feminine energy that people are willing to kill and destroy people over it. And that's something that I think over time, women, we've lost our access to that. The patriarchy, everything in life has put women on this, we're supposed to listen to a man. But interestingly enough, that this Aquarius shift that we had in our Pluto and all of that, it's giving more divine feminine energy. It's giving women being more in power, like we were meant to, and have access to that in a way that's, it's not about women are going to do what men did and women are going to be the ones in control and men are going to, it's not that. It's about, we're going to have the unity that we were meant to have before all the hate, before all the abuse and trauma and all of those things. But it's about things being more balanced. And so part of that has to happen when women wake up to our power. Some of that happens when women heal their trauma. Some of that happens when women connect with other women and we become sources together. Like, it all happens, in these different ways. But that was one of the things that was very difficult for me to accept, was that sometimes when you have a lot of high vibrational healing energy, people are really anxious to take it. And sometimes that can explain why a lot of healers have a lot of trauma that's very severe. So it's hard, but we're all here in it together. So that's what people need to understand and hear, is that this is a collective thing that's happening. And by speaking, by sharing that space, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about where two or more are gathered, and that's somewhat true. When you, a healer, gets together with another healer, or even if you're just people that are healing, even if you're people that are on the same vibration and it's lower, you're going to magnify that. So it's like, excuse me, it's very similar to, have you ever put a mirror up against a mirror and then you see that reflection of all the mirrors? It's literally that. So that's why, like, when me and my best friend who's a healer, when we get together, very weird electrical things happen. Like, it's like we glitch things because our feminine energy is really, really high when we're together. So start paying attention to how your body changes and feels when you're around certain people. Or if you recognize that that person is on some lower vibrational energy, you may feel more depleted when you're around them. You may feel more like you got a headache or something's pulling on you in some way. And then when you get around people who are a little bit higher than you may feel like, oh, I need to be giving more. You know, your body is talking to you about everything going on spiritually. You just kind of have to learn the language of your spirit, your mind, and your body. Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting us to talk about divine feminine energy, but it something in what you've said about it really resonated with me. So I think, I think it was important for me to hear that. But I think, as much as it was important for me to hear, it was certainly very important for other people in the audience to hear about it as well. So Khaliah, I want to ask you, for everybody that has been watching our conversation today and wants to connect with you, and they want to find out more, they want to, work with you, where can they find you and how can they connect with you?
So I'm on all the platforms. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I have a link tree. So I'm the Khaliah Sage on all platforms. I am absolutely happy to help anybody who, needs help with their journey. Or I do coaching, I do readings, I do mediumship readings, I do all of that. So you can find me on TikTok, you can find me on Instagram, Linktree, or at my email, thekaliahsage@gmail.com. So I'm here. I really am excited about helping people. I've been working with clients, for the past 6 months, and I love them. And I'm working with some coaching clients right now. They come back and I love it. So I'm more than willing to help anybody on their journey. And I especially have so much space for people that are coming from an ultra religious background and they have fears about, you know, getting into spirituality, and because we've all been told it's, it's evil and it. So I have a special place in my heart for people who are overcoming religious trauma. Um, so yeah, that's where you guys can find me. And I'm gonna start a YouTube very soon. I do have a channel, but it doesn't have any videos on it yet. I'm still working on it. But yes, the Khaliah Sage on all